Hey everyone, Delix Alex here, Panasonic's product manager for camera systems. I have also with me Mike Rich from Panopto, business development manager. Mike, thanks for joining us. So in
Thanks,
today's
great to be here.
presentation, the key message of it is educational workflows with NDI, or network device interface. So we're going to be covering what is NDI, how does NDI fit into your overall ecosystem of video production. So maybe you're an educational institution and entering into the world of either lecture capture or distance learning. That's what today's presentation and webinar will cover. So a bit of a flow here. The first thing is media over IP. What is media over IP? How does NDI fit into media over IP? And third, why is the network so advantageous for such video capture workflows? The next component of it is what kind of cameras and technology are available to produce content over the network. Finally, Mike is going to cover with the Panopto platform how you can take it to the next level. Now you have your camera, your acquisition side, but the workflow and the distribution side, how that all plays in here. So at Panasonic, we have this new message, we're all N. N stands for Network Device Interface, or NDI. So where does NDI fit into all of this? When I start the discussion of media over IP, I like covering it at its basics. So there are two categories, streaming and distribution. Streaming we've been doing for quite some time now, streaming from a camera to a YouTube or a Facebook to a client device of sorts, whether it's a smartphone, tablet, or PC. Typically with this, you have a very heavily compressed video, and it's distributed at somewhat of a high latency, maybe a few seconds later it's seen at the other end. So that works for that sort of workflow where you're trying to get video to some client over the web. But when you're using IP for video, the requirements are very different. So when you're using video for distribution, some of the standards that exist at the high end, for example, are SMPTE 2110, but also technologies like NDI or HD-based TIP or SDVoE. There's several technologies available. It's typically uncompressed or lossless, and that means different things to different people, but it's looking at it, you typically don't see a degradation in picture quality. Finally, it's very low latency. I want to be able to monitor that, and it happen almost instantly. So NDI falls into this distribution category. So why would we even consider media over IP? A couple of things here. It's a familiar cable, right? HDMI or HDSDI, coaxial cable, is harder to come by than a Cat5 cable. Cat5 is very easy to crimp, it's readily available, and it's cost effective. Routing is easy because ideally in a system you want all your ins and outs to connect to each other, and now your network is that connection interface. And you can move to a truly single cable workflow. So power, control, audio and video, tally, all of these sorts of different signal paths required for video production are possible here over a single cable with power over Ethernet and those sorts of technologies. So that's the beauty of network-based workflows. So NDI, it's a technology pioneered by a company called NewTek. They're out of San Antonio, Texas. They launched NDI about 2 or 3 years ago, and it's quite a revolutionary technology with probably the largest existing user base all around. It's a very connectivity-oriented or Internet of Things approach to video. Today with our smartphones, tablets, and devices, we're so used to being able to just connect to anything. We can connect our garage door at home or a smart light bulb. So why not bring that same approach of connectivity of all these different devices to video? So the other thing they did was they allowed software vendors to very, very easily implement it. So a platform like Panopto, for example, in this case of lecture capture, but all sorts of different software applications. More recently, companies like us, Panasonic, who make hardware products, are now supporting the technology. So the other key element here is that it works on existing key infrastructure. We're not asking you to build out a whole media network or a 10 gigi or 25 gigi. Of course, you can use that technology, but it's not required. You can use existing gigabit Ethernet infrastructure that's probably already in your facility today. So if we look at centralized AV infrastructure, this is ideal, right? Maybe this is not a system that you would have immediately or in the near future, but the ideal is this, right? Within a particular facility, all the sources, whether it's playback or a live camera source, connect to all of your destinations somehow. Today, this is done with a proprietary distribution core of sorts, whether it's HD-based, T-based, or SDI-based. So with the network, the advantage is that you can really move to a more seamless and streamlined workflow, because the network allows me to connect to a single source, and I don't need to build a dedicated point-to-point path for that. It's just on the network, and I can subscribe or connect to it. So this is a bit of a list right now of some key partners of NDI and that support NDI, and Panasonic came on board about a year or two ago, but this is the first real exciting year for us because we have the technology now built into cameras. No external software, laptops, or converters needed. It's built right into the camera. Some of the partners include NewTek, of course, with their TriCaster family of product. They have a whole suite of tools and utilities for recording, for screen capture, for converting NDI to USB video class, for example. So a ton of tremendous and useful tools. There's graphics overlay software partners. There's multi-camera live production software like Wirecaster, vMix, or something free even like OBS that supports NDI. But something that's very critical to today's webinar is the lecture capture component. So more and more vendors, we are seeing the top lecture capture platforms in the industry are now starting to support NDI, and we have Mike here today with the Panopto platform to explain that connectivity in a moment here. So when we look at a NDI ecosystem, it's quite intriguing because of the amount of power you have with the network. So if we have an integrated production switcher and a camera on the same network, or we have a recording software or graphics engines and all sorts of different things, they all can connect to each other very easily and very freely. So this is quite powerful, and we're going to cover the lecture capture component here in a moment. So why does this all matter, right? So I talked to why media over IP is important in general and why we want to move towards IP, but for education it makes a lot of sense. For the very first reason of this is the network's already available in an educational institution. It's probably already in our walls. We have the network infrastructure in place, so it's very easy to migrate to video workflows. Some of these workflows that we're considering here in today's webinar, for example, just something as simple as on-site image magnification or monitoring, where you have a spillover room, for example, in your university, and you need to bring in attendees into a remote destination. It could also be monitoring for student analysis or medical type teaching courses. Also live broadcast and webcast, the ability for a student to be in their dorm room or back at home and not have to be physically present in a lecture. Of course, lecture capture for on-demand purposes, so taking content and making it available, and that adds several other elements, right? Capturing the presentation of that particular professor, for example, the live video, maybe Q&A that's happening in that space. So there's that could get a little bit more advanced here. And then we also see quite often today that really a lot of the teleconferencing tools are also being used in an educational environment, maybe just for traditional meetings and that sort of thing, but also to bring students in. So all sorts of workflows with video that allow to us at Panasonic to assist you in building workflow to deliver new experiences for your educational users. So what we're talking about today is how to build this with NDI, right? So the key component here is we have the cameras, and we have multiple software pieces on the network. The cameras here, in this case, are Panasonic PTZ cameras. I'm going to go into why PTZ is becoming a very popular technology for this sort of workflow. We have the HLC 100 Live Production Center, which is an integrated production system for multi-camera systems. And then you can see how some of these NDI tools, freely available, can allow you to do screen captures for your presentations, for example, or convert to USB video class, or even use something like Studio Monitor to bring content elsewhere on that network for remote viewing. But then we have platforms like Panopto that can support NDI technology to bring in cameras from basically anywhere on that particular network. So why PTZ? So PTZ stands for pan-tilt zoom, and it's an integrated camera system here that allows you to remotely control the camera. So you don't need a manned camera system, or you don't need an operator standing next to that camera. So this is very advantageous, especially in an educational environment, because you could have a camera in the back of the room. It's unobtrusive. It's not disturbing what's happening in that physical space. So we have customers at Panasonic, from broadcasters to live events to all sorts of different things, applications that can take advantage of the camera here. And really it's a testament to the quality that we put in our cameras. So why a Panasonic PTZ camera though? So the first thing I always like highlighting is our professional image quality. We come from a broadcast and cinematic world. We're taking technologies available in higher end cameras and putting into the form factor of a camera. But it's not just image sensors. It's also technology in terms of image correction, 16-axis color correction, manual adjustment and shading capabilities, all sorts of video-related workflows that are required in a professional camera versus a teleconference or a security camera. The smoothness in the pan tilt and zoom. So the fine degree of movement, so you can move it live and on air, and it doesn't look like a robotic camera. The interfacing available, so we obviously are talking about NDI in this webinar, but also SDI, HDMI, IP, and serial-based control as well. So the core concept here is live production in the sense of remote control, remote live video production, being able to deliver content remotely to viewers, but also control it remotely as well. So our camera lineup today, we have several models from the HE or HN38 all the way up to the HE or HN130. All of these cameras have very unique feature sets, but the core competency of NDI and network-based workflow is very similar. So the 38, 40, and 70 are all single-chip imagers with different optical zoom capabilities, image stabilization capabilities, as well as interfacing as well in terms of what system it can connect to or interface to. The 130 is our top-of-the-line model with a 3-chip image sensor, so very, very good in low light and color reproduction. So the 38 model is quite new for us, and I'll explain it here in a moment. You may have noticed on my previous slide here, though, it said NDI HX. So what is NDI HX versus just NDI? So I consider HX to be somewhat of a subset of the overall NDI protocol. Three differences are compression, bandwidth, and latency. So speaking first to compression, it's a H.264 long GOP-based compression, meaning every frame isn't encoded uniquely to save bandwidth. So it's a very intelligent technology, and you can get much lower bit rates. Bandwidth, obviously as well, NDI natively is probably close to 100 megabits per second. So HX allows us to get more sources on the network. Finally, this latency, just because it is a 264-based codec, adds a few frames. Still within the ability to even notice that latency if you're just monitoring it, but that is something to keep in mind, especially in an IMAG or image magnification type environment in terms of audio, video, and all sorts of sync that's required in that sort of environment. The 38 model, so the 38 versus the 40. The 40 we've had in our lineup till the end of last year, and the 38 we just introduced a few months back, and it's a very powerful model for the price point of the camera. The only differences are 22x zoom versus 30x, as well as it's only available in an HDMI interfacing model, where the 40 has the HDSDI model as well. So what do you get with NDI HX and our pan-tilt zoom cameras? Inherently with NDI in general, you get auto discovery and ease. So one of the awesome features available about NDI is I can connect it to a network, and with basic networking knowledge, basically that camera is automatically discovered on that network, and there's not an extra complexity that's required because it's on the network. Also, PTZ control and tally and all those sorts of signals are integrated into NDI, allowing for single cable connectivity. But from Panasonic, a couple of different things. So the first thing is we have a lineup and a range from the 38 up to the 130, from your 2K price range to the 9K price range. You have a whole entire control backbone available to you. For example, we have joystick controllers or dedicated shading panels, but also software solutions that are powerful. Also, the image quality. I spoke earlier about the uniqueness about the Panasonic PTZ cameras in terms of interfacing image quality and smoothness. And then there are several other elements as well in terms of the ability to multicast and audio inputs to the camera. I do want to mention, if you have an HE40 today, UE70 or HE130, you have the ability to upgrade to NDI HX, and that's an all-software upgrade that's available in the new tech store at the link on the slide. It's a very simple upgrade. You just download it, and it's a key code that's enabled. You do need a firmware upgrade for your camera, so you want to make sure you're on the latest firmware upgrade. So I highlighted earlier the NDI tools available in the marketplace, and these are freely available, made by NewTek. One particular piece of software is just a viewer software, and it's called Studio Monitor. It allows you to view any NDI source on the network and control it, access some of its settings, and it's quite powerful. So even if you're not using your NDI for your distribution connectivity, just to have these as a flexibility tool to monitor or control your camera is quite powerful. Also, the NDI Virtual Input or Virtual Camera tool, basically it's USB emulation. So as you may know, our Panasonic cameras do have USB right on the back of them, the 38, 40, and 70. But one inherent problem with USB is the cable length. You can go maybe 6-10 feet, and then you would need extenders. So using this mechanism, you can connect in this configuration as shown on the screen. So camera on the network, your laptop computer on that same network, and using the NDI Virtual Input or Camera tool, it will convert the NDI signal and make it look like a USB web camera. So any piece of software that doesn't inherently support NDI, you can interface to. The PTZ Camera Controller family. So I mentioned earlier, one of our uniqueness in our Panasonic PTZ camera lineup is the whole control backbone available to you. So joystick controllers, shading panels, but we also have different other different tools. For example, our HE810, which is a hybrid software controller, iPad-based, that uses a reference shot to control the camera, auto tracking capabilities. We have a new PTZ controller software, and then the HLC100. So I'm going to dive into some of these here. The first thing is the PTZ Control Center. This is a free Windows-based software platform. What this allows you to do is connect up to multiple cameras, control them, configure them. It's just a good management, especially in the case you have multiple cameras. This works in a single camera mode. It works with the HE810 camera. And it also works with you can record a panoramic image to pan and scan the room, capture a wide-angle image, and use that as a reference shot to click, and the camera will move there. Also, auto tracking. We do have 2 auto tracking software solutions, especially in an educational environment where you're looking to automate the entire workflow and ultimately get to a system where there's fewer and fewer operators and more rooms capturing content. Auto tracking is quite important. This works with a facial recognition-based technology, and as well as motion detection, contrast detection, to really capture and automate the workflow. The way this works is that we do also have an API and SDK with this, and we're working on mechanisms to, for example, schedule, so at a particular time, load a particular professor's face in, so that way the auto tracking can start automatically. So there's several elements we're working on. This is probably the direction of the future. Now the AV-HLC 100 Live Production Center. So this product is very new for us, just started shipping. And the concept with this product is all-in-one production. It combines all the essentials that you need for a live production environment. Today, this webinar is actually being produced using the AV-HLC 100. And what it allows you to do in terms of removing points of failure, for example, and automating the production is quite powerful. So recording, streaming, Mike is being remotely involved in this production using something called Skype TX, audio mixing, streaming, and camera control as well. So everything you need for a robotic remote live production is available to you in this. Input-wise, it has 8 inputs, 4 of which are baseband. Input 1 is HDMI or SDI, 2, 3, and 4 are SDI, and the rest are NDI. You also have 2 SDI outputs, one of which can be an aux bus. That is just a clean feeder. You just need to record a particular camera. Like I said, streaming just uses RTMP and allows you to stream to social destinations. There's a bunch of preset destinations for this. Also keyers, graphics overlays, and everything you ultimately need for a webinar, a webcast, or a vlog type production. So coming back to this slide that I showed earlier, as you can see, the concept is you can do all the various workflows I posed earlier in terms of satellite campuses, video conferencing, presentation, capture, also and deliver it over NDI, whether it's a single camera type system or a multi-camera type system. So in a moment here, I'm going to pass it off to Mike to join in on the production, so we can learn how it connects to the Panopto system. So the HN38, 40, 70 can all have the built-in NDI functionality, or the HLC 100 has an NDI output. All of these NDI outputs could be interfaced with Panopto, whether it's single camera or a multi-camera type production. So I'm going to pass it off to Mike here for an overview on the Panopto system, what are the fortes of their lecture capture platform, and how it works with NDI. Mike, take it away.
Great. Delix, thanks for having us and allowing Panopto to be part of the presentation. We're excited about the work we've been doing with Panasonic and making Panopto part of the NDI workflow that are changing the way that we do a lot of things here in the AV world. If we take a look at the Panopto platform, you know, one of the reasons why people come to Panopto is they ask themselves, well, I'm getting all this great content, now I have all this hardware and this equipment that I bought from Panasonic. How do I make all of that video accessible to my faculty, to my administrators, and certainly to my students? So if we take a look at an overview slide here, we can talk a little bit about how the Panopto platform works. And there's really 2 main areas that people use Panopto for. One is creating a searchable video portal for the institution's needs. And this is a version of YouTube, but unlike YouTube, it's a private and highly curated, password protected, and administered system that allows you to get video to the right people at the right time. And then secondly, people come to Panopto for making it very easy to handle any type of video recording system, whether it's the advanced workflows that Delix was talking about, where you've got a PTZ camera feeding into a switcher and you have other video sources as well in a lecture hall, all the way down to a student recording on the webcam on their laptop. All those things are handled in Panopto. Panopto really focuses on 3 key workflows for making video easy. And in this next slide, you'll see 3 areas to think about once you are planning and instrumenting a video system. It's how do you make the creation of video easy for your students and your faculty? How do you distribute that video and get it to the right audiences? And how do you make it discoverable so that once you have hundreds of thousands of hours of lectures being recorded year after year, how do you make it so that people can get to the right content for them? And with Panopto, there's features to make recording and uploading and editing very easy. I'll show you a couple of those in a second. The webcasting is another area that people use Panopto for, whether you're doing a lecture to students who might be outside the classroom, or whether you're doing the commencement ceremony. All those can be managed through Panopto software, combined with the Panasonic equipment that Delix mentioned earlier. And then the last case is the distribution. So making things shareable and making things searchable is very important. As we move on, we'll talk a little bit about how the Panasonic cameras that Delix showed actually plug into the Panopto workflow specifically. In this case, you have a Panasonic PTZ camera that Delix showed you earlier, and a Panasonic digital whiteboard. Both of those, as well as other video sources, can feed into any type of system running the Panopto software, and the output from that video will be uploaded into the Panopto cloud and available based on the permission set for that video. Panopto has both software that can exist on devices that we call remote recorders that automate this process in a lecture hall, and those remote recorders can also be administered in the cloud. As you see here, this is a web browser that can be used to look at the video source and either manually start the recording or schedule the recording. What often happens is you have a lecture hall that is outfitted with the equipment that we've been talking about today, and then we hook into the LMS system for the school or the university. We pull in all the scheduling for the rooms that are recording and when those recordings are taking place and what course is being recorded at a given time. And the Panopto software will make sure that at 1 o'clock the camera turns on to record History 101 and it files that in the right folder, and then at 2:30 it turns on to record History 201 and it also sends that to the right folder and makes sure it's permissioned to the right users. Once the content is created, it's then available for users to see. And another key piece of thinking about video in an educational construct is how do you make it easy for viewers to learn in a multi-video source environment. And Panopto has a multi-source viewer that gives people access not just to a video of the lecturer, but also the slides that they're presenting. And in advanced institutional cases, you would also have things like a digital whiteboard like we showed earlier, maybe a digital microscope or a document camera that's pointing down at a mock patient or papers or whatever it may be that needs to be digitized. Panopto is designed to allow the students and the content creators to help each other determine when a video source is most helpful to be viewed. The other thing Panopto does is it makes it very easy for a student to find a section of the lecture later. So in this case, if I was a student and I wanted to drill down on one specific topic, I could open the video, click on the table of contents item that was automatically created based on the slides that were associated with that presentation, and I'd skip directly to the moment in time that I want to see. Another way that Panopto makes it easy for content creators to work with video is through our editor. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see Panopto's web-based editor that doesn't require a plugin. It allows a content creator to use any web browser to look at the content that they viewed, easily trim out parts of the video that need to be trimmed out, and then publish the video for immediate access by the rest of the faculty and staff. It can also be re-edited at any time if you make a mistake or you want to change something later. And this is very helpful in a situation where you might have a large lecture hall again, and maybe the presentation started 5 minutes late or ends a few minutes early. As an administrator, you can come in and trim those sections out and really focus on what the students need to focus on. The last feature I'll touch on that's really important to helping make video discoverable is searching inside of videos. And Panopto does a great feature for search where we index 4 different things when a video is uploaded into our system. First of all, we index the metadata that is entered along with the presentation itself, but we also index any spoken word through audio speech recognition technology. We use optical character recognition to index the words on the digital whiteboard I mentioned earlier. We also index everything in the slides that are associated with the presentation. All of that becomes searchable for the end user. So in this case, if I was searching for this topic here, if I was in business school and taking a look at the Challenger sale technique and what I need to know about that, this particular video in my search results is an hour long, but I can jump directly to about 40 minutes in or so, and that's really where the speaker is talking the most about this particular topic. One other thing I'll mention is our LMS integration. I touched on this earlier, but as I mentioned earlier, we integrate with all the different LMSs, and many times people use Panopto directly inside of those LMSs. So we embed videos in those LMSs, and again, we take the scheduling information that then ties all the information in the LMS to the Panasonic hardware that you've procured to make one central system and workflow that's easy as an administrator to actually set up. The last slide I have here is about the Panasonic NDI integration and how that actually works with Panopto. So here you'll see a very easy 3-step setup. As Delix mentioned earlier, you have the Panasonic camera or other Panasonic device that you would simply install and configure as normal. And then you have these NDI tools that he touched on, and he mentioned the NDI Virtual Input, which we would use on our recorder software, whether that's a remote recorder or a dedicated recorder appliance. You would simply go into the NDI Virtual Input and select the Panasonic camera that you want to use on this particular recording device. And then once that device is recognized by the Windows application, Panopto will recognize it as a video source, just as if it was plugged in through a USB port. So you don't have to have the actual recording software, the Windows box, located in the same facility as where the camera is. You don't have to run long cables from the camera to the actual recording appliance. You can do all of the recording and encoding through the cloud and through the network using Panopto. So that's a very brief overview of how the Panopto interface works, and hope that helps you see the entire start to finish process of everything we've been talking about today.
Yeah, so thanks, Mike. I think Mike did a great job of explaining the entire connectivity of the workflow, right? So camera component there, connecting via NDI, whether multi-camera or not. You have Panopto there in the middle, managing all of these various educational specific workflows in terms of that are required in terms of making it easy for a user to digest content, and then also even speaking to the integrations they have to get it ultimately to the final destination, whether it's a particular learning management system. So all of this is quite impressive and really speaks to the way of the future with NDI network device interface and network-based workflows, and also just overall connected-based workflows. And now all of this is done with just standard off-the-shelf network hardware. There's nothing particularly special here other than software and camera hardware. So it's very, very powerful on what you can do. Panopto is a workflow, but even if you do some of these other simultaneous workflows in terms of distribution, in terms of distance learning or moving video between multiple spaces on a campus or satellite facilities, all of this is doable with this sort of workflow. I thank you, viewers, for watching this webinar. I thank Mike for remotely attending here and joining us here today. I think it was very informative, seeing the total picture and total story of what you can really do with this. Again, I am Delix Alex, product manager for camera systems at Panasonic. Thank you for watching.